Alright, so we're still going to have a conversation at the end of this message, even with a smaller group. Just wanted to kind of keep that, I guess, in your mind as we go. Because I'm just calling this message literally, what the heck. Like, the world has gone crazy. We were going to do this last week after the shootings and stuff. But I don't want it to focus just on the shooting because I think there's really more wrong with the world. So we're just going to call this message, what the heck. Like, what is going on with this world and what can we do to try to fix it a little bit. A lot of this sermon, I mean, you guys know in the past, my inspiration has come from Bryce. It's come from watching movies. This one has come from everywhere. I've got stuff from, you should see the screenshots on my phone. I had Instagram posts, I had Facebook posts, I had movies. Last night I started watching a movie and half the sermon came to me last night. So, I mean, God's Word's everywhere. The sermon kind of came from everywhere. So, we're going to start off by kind of talking about, I think, what the problems are, because I don't want to end with the problems, and we'll kind of go into the solution. So I don't want to think it's all this negative, like the world's going to hell, because that's not, I don't believe that's the case. First problem kind of came last night. So basically we have two sides. And no one wants to take responsibility for anything that we have. So we want to talk modern day politics. We got the left. They want to blame the right. You got the right that wants to blame the left. You've got the conservatives that want to blame the moderates. You've got us as constituents. We want to just blame it all on the politicians. No one wants to take responsibility for anything at all. And I think that's really a huge problem for what we have going on right now. And I think, honestly, not to sound cliche, I think everyone kind of knew this was where it's going, but I think as a society, we've drifted so far from God that we don't necessarily know where to come back to. And that's where a lot of my message kind of is at this point, because I think that we've drifted away from God and we've put so much hope in false God that we don't really, we don't take what God says to be really any value. And there's so much in the Bible that even if you don't believe the words of it per se, there's so many moral principles behind it. But everyone's kind of shunned that. And that really, you take that back to the forefathers, and really go back even to the Mayflower Compact when, there was 100 and, how many people? 102 passengers basically hopped in a ship, not really knowing where they were going to go, because they wanted to be able to worship freely, and they wanted to get away from the king's rule. And so when you look at what they wrote, what the Pilgrims wrote in the Mayflower Compact, the first really document of anything in society for rules to live by, it says, "In the name of God, amen. We choose names, we whose names are underwritten, the loyal subjects of our dread sovereign Lord King James, by the grace of God, of England, France, and Ireland, King, defender of the faith, having undertaken for the glory of God, an advancement of the Christian faith, and the honor of our king and country, a voyage to plant the first colony in the northern parts of Virginia, do, by the present, solemnly and mutually in the presence of God, and one of another covenant and combine ourselves together into a civil body politic for our better ordering and preservation and furtherance of the ends aforesaid, and by virtue hereof to enact, constitute, and frame such just equal laws, ordinances, acts, constitutions, and offices from time to time, it shall be thought most meet and covenant for the general of the good colony, unto which we promise all submission and obedience, in witness whereof we have hereunto subscribed our names at Cape Cod, the 11th of November, the region of our sovereign Lord King James of England, France, and Ireland, the 18th, and of Scotland, the 54th. So, aside from me butchering the language written there, if you look, the word God is written so many times from the beginning. So, the Pilgrims knew, in order to have a society to function, to have rules, to have moral high grounds, you needed God in that. And I think that's important because these guys could have just turned into straight savages right away, but they had this moral high ground, this moral standard they lived to, and we've gotten so far away from that. The Bible talks about there'll be no false gods before us, but I think that if we're all honest, we've all put false gods before God in itself, be it our Facebook, our social media time, our jobs, whatever. spend too much time in that, and it's kind of a trickle-down effect. So it trickles right into our second issue that I think we stop spending time together as family and friends. Hebrews 10:24 and 25 says, "And let us consider how we may spur one another towards love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching." So, honestly, you could probably camp out right, literally just in this sermon. If you look at the reasons people give for not going to church, like today, like they don't want to gather together for one reason or another. We're all so busy. We're all so caught up in our own life. I saw actually both of you guys shared that post the other day about, if you see that person sitting in the chair by themselves, go over and talk to them. If you see someone having an issue, go over and talk to them. But we've drifted away from that because we're so caught up in our own stuff that, God forbid, we go and we interact with somebody else. And, I will be honest with you guys, this one hit me last night because I was sitting there and I told you it's been kind of a long week, but I just sat down and Bryce got some Legos and we played Legos for like an hour and a half, and it just felt good just to sit there and just play Legos and not worry about anything else. But we've drifted from being able to do that. I've used excuses like I'm trying to write a sermon, or I'm trying to do this, or I'm trying to do that. But guess what? Like, gathering together, especially as a family, that's where you're going to make some serious changes, because if a child isn't seeing you act how you're supposed to be acting, what are they going to follow? So, starting with that false God premise, and then it goes down into we don't have time to be together, and that's, I think, huge. Because if I'm off working all the time, who's Bryce going to see? Who's Bryce going to see leading by example along the way? It's not going to happen unless we take time to gather together. Not just me and Bryce, but then, coming to church on Sunday mornings and gathering together as other believers, getting together during the week so you can kind of get that spiritual revival that you need. Who's going to be those good examples? I skipped over 3. I think it's important, though. I'll just use the Bible verse. We value our own needs above everyone else's. 1 Peter 4:8 says, "Above all, love each other deeply, because love covers a multitude of sins." So, I'm going to talk about that, but, we're the most important people on this planet. Like me right here, I'm more important than Troy, I'm more important than Paul, I'm more important than Sherry. If we're honest, that's an attitude that a lot of us share. It's not right, but, like I said, I have a tiny little leak in my sink right now. To me, that's the most important thing in the world, and we value it so much that we miss the needs of others because we're so focused on ourselves, but we're not looking outward. And then this one, I think social media has us addicted to wanting to be right. In particular, to have a particular point of view, etc., etc., turn us into insult machines, and really, the more that we insult people, the less that they're going to listen. Proverbs 29:23 says, Pride ends in humiliation, while humility brings honor. If you guys looked at this past 2 weeks since the shootings have occurred, the amount of arguments that have taken place on social media about it should be gun rights, it should be a moral thing, it should be this, it should be that. No one wants to come to any sort of any agreement on anything. We just want to be right. So, if we as constituents, as people in this room can't even agree on that, you're never going to get politicians to say, you know what, I think that we should do this, you think that we should do that, let's find a common ground. There's no common ground anymore. We've gone away from that entirely, and, I think that even sometimes as churches, we don't do anything together because we're like, well, you're a Methodist, or you're a Catholic, or, you're a startup non-denominational church. Well, we have a common ground, and that common ground is Jesus, but we've gotten so far away from that, that here we sit. And I think that we're missing out on doing so much for this world, really. We're talking about, next week during our vision meeting, we're going to talk about being able to do things. Anybody listening, we have a ton of kids in this room right now, so whatever, it is what it is. But, we're so focused on ourselves that, when we decide, we're going to take on this project of helping this family, it'd be great if we could say, let's call up this church and do this, or let's call up that church and do that. But the reality is that it probably won't happen because we all want to get stuck in our own ways. And none of us want to admit, that's a good idea. But you know what? I don't care if we start something and then someone else takes it over, because if it's going to advance the kingdom, going to help someone, like that's what our end principle has to be. But we've shied away from that entirely. And the last point for the problems, and then we're going to get into the solutions part. I think that, we don't take the Bible very serious as believers. I think if we're really honest, we read it, we hear it, and then we do nothing with it. And Matthew 3:8 says, prove by the way that you live, that you've repented of your sins and turned to God. And I just think that, a lot of times we just don't do it. I don't really think it needs to even be described much more, but, people are really, they're watching us, and we're reading the Bible, and we're like, oh, that's a cool story. Doesn't relate to me at all, and that's it. Or we're unrealistic. We're like, yeah, Peter denied Jesus, but I would never do that. And, so we're not taking the time to look deep into our souls about anything. And that really pins right into the biggest solution. Ironically, I found, as I was doing this, I had the messages about ready. Then I found a book that my mom had bought me a few years ago, and it was called Rediscovering the Soul of America. It begins with changing your own. And I think that that's really like one of our bigger solutions, is that, we need to really examine our own souls and figure stuff out. Like, we want to help out there, but first we need to be right in here. And, if we're not right here, people are going to know that. And I think that when you examine your soul and you're really doing some digging, that's why I love preaching, because each week I force myself to kind of look a little bit deeper than what I should. But instead of going into the, saying I'm too busy to read the Bible or whatever, it forces me to be a little bit more busy, or not busy, but, do a little bit more thinking about it all. So, anyways, the main text now that we're going to dive into is 1 Peter 3:8-16. It says, finally, all of you like-minded, be sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate and humble. Don't repay evil with evil or insult with insult. On the contrary, repay evil with blessing, because this you were called so that you may inherit a blessing for. Whoever would love life and see good days must keep their tongue from evil and their lips from deceitful speech. They must turn from evil and do good. They must seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their prayers. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. Who is going to harm you if you're eager to do good? But even if you should suffer for what is right, you are blessed. Do not fear their threats. Do not be frightened. But in your hearts, revere Christ as your Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. Do this with gentleness and respect. Keep a clear conscience, so that you would speak maliciously against you in good behavior in Christ. So that those who speak maliciously against you and your good behavior in Christ may be ashamed of their slander. So I think Peter really just gave us all the answers that we need. Like, we need to start with ourselves, and then we just need to do good, let our speech speak for itself. Like, again, no one's gonna, if we're saying that we're Christians, if we're going to church every week, and we're swearing, and we're calling this person stupid, and we're spreading this rumor, and we're doing this, then how are we being the change that needs to happen? It goes back to starting with making sure that your own soul is right. When your own soul is right and your priorities are good, then you can make sure that your child's soul starts to be pure. It's kind of like this trickle-down effect. What you have in your heart is going to get passed down to your child. So that means spending time with your child and making sure that, they're learning their morals. Because here's the thing. Going back to this blame game, whose responsibility is it to teach our children and our grandchildren? It's ours. Right? We want to blame it on the school systems and this, that, and the other thing. And they are learning a bunch of crap there, don't get me wrong. But it comes down to what their core values are. It's our job to instill that in them. It's, so if they see you coming home and popping a drink every day, guess what? What's probably going to end up happening? They're going to do the same thing. There's just a study actually on the radio that talked about if you gave a child alcohol at an early age, people thought, oh, that's harmless to let your 12-year-old have a sip of a drink. And they started a study that said, guess what? You give them that drink, they're more likely to turn into an alcoholic or have an addiction. Why? Because they've tasted it for the first time. They're seeing you do it, and you're telling them that it's okay. They're getting that taste. So, starts with your own soul. It trickles down. Billy Graham was trying to find a good quote from him. He just recently passed. He said, "The greatest legacy that one can pass to another child, to pass on to one's children and grandchildren, is not money or material things, but rather a legacy of character and faith." So going back to our Bible verse that we talked about, how are you going to have character and faith? You're going to do that by exactly that. Practicing what we preach. That's a crazy, crazy concept, isn't it? Practicing what we preach, talking about doing this, and then again, we go off and we do whatever we want to do. No. You know, we need to do what we say we're going to do, and spend time with our family. Then we're going to worry, our legacy is going to be so much greater than, I left you this nice house, and I left you this, this great car, or whatever. Car's going to break down, house is going to have a leaky pipe, and guess what? It might get sold. But if you teach your child to love Christ and to love others, that's the greatest legacy that we can pass on. I wanted to do this quote, and then I'm just going to talk about the National Monument, but Jaden, I told you I got stuff a little bit from everywhere. Jaden Powell said, for one of his Facebook posts, he said, "Some people could prevent a lot of problems in this nation by taking an extra 5 seconds to ask, is it really going to make a better place before posting?" So not just posting, but by speaking. Is it really going to benefit anybody if you say post what you're just posting, or say what you're going to say? And I think that, for somebody, I don't think it really necessarily affects people in this room, but someone listening, I think that that's important. Like, just take a minute, think about it. Is it worth it? That's what you need to ask. Is it worth it to post whatever? Especially, again, I'm not bashing any side of it, but with this whole gun control thing, it always disgusts me, because the reality is that 17 children lost their lives, and immediately we're talking about, we need gun control, or we need to do this. Just take a minute and just mourn for the families in this case, right? Everything doesn't need to be politicized. Everything doesn't need to be crazy. Just take a minute and think about what you're going to say. Is it going to benefit anything by doing that? Ronald Reagan said, "Live simply, love generously, care deeply, speak kindly, and leave the rest to God." So the greatest thing we can do to renew our soul is start with your own heart. And Ronald Reagan, I just think that really just epitomized that. That's all we have to do, guys. It's not like rocket science. To change this world, we need to live simply. Don't get caught up in so much crap. Love generously. Again, take the time to be with somebody. Care deeply. Someone's got a need, take care of it. That's like my biggest excitement about this ministry, is that we really have the opportunity as a smaller church to care deeply. Like, find a project, take the time, raise the money, and do it. That's caring deeply. Caring deeply is just saying, I'm going to pray for you. Sometimes that's all you can do. But caring deeply is going out to the hospital to visit somebody. It's cooking a meal for somebody. It's, shoveling a roof. It's helping with taxes, whatever. That's caring deeply for somebody. It's more than just saying. It's doing. And leave the rest to God. There's so many things we get caught up in because we try to play God. We try to fix things on our own. And there's just certain things that we can't fix. We're praying about needs for loved ones. There's only so far that we can go on our end, that we just have to kind of trust God in the process for this. I bring it up with my older brother, for example. There's times where we're like, what the heck is going on? And, he's going to church every week now, and he is inviting us out for dinners and stuff. I mean, it's not just something that happened. That's, we just prayed about it. We do our part, invite him up, and then we leave the rest to God. Now he's texting us with pictures of $50 Nerf guns saying, "When you coming out again?" That's leaving the rest to God. There's only so much that you can do, and when you worry about all the small stuff, you get so preoccupied with it that you're just missing the opportunity to be a blessing to others. And close with, have anybody in this room been to the National Monument to the Forefathers in Plymouth? No?
No.
You went there?
Plymouth Rock?
No, the National Monument to the Forefathers. It's in this tiny little secluded part of a village in Plymouth, Massachusetts. So it was, I want to see if I can, anyways, it was literally a monument that Congress and the state of Massachusetts paid for, and it was a monument to the, to the Pilgrims. But if you look at this monument, there's so much deeper meaning to it, and this is the part that came to me last night. I was trying to figure out what to fall asleep to in bed, and I came across, and I can't even think of the name of it now. But anyways, it was a Kirk Cameron documentary that I had watched before, and he was talking about this. Monumental, it was called. And in this documentary, there's a picture you can kind of see a little bit. It's literally the perfect example of what is a society, aside from what we talked about here. Really a few simple things that if we do this, then we're gonna really right the ship. The first thing is it's the picture of the lady. She's pointing up. Her name, and on there, her name is Faith. We need to understand again that everything that we have comes from God, and we need to get back to that faith. I think that really, again, we just want to accredit everything to like just luck or dumb chance or whatever, or we want to play God ourselves. It's not the case. We need to trust God. The second one is there's something called morality. It's a picture of a person, and then underneath it says morality. So it holds the Ten Commandments in the left hand and the scroll of Revelation, the last book of the Bible, in the right. She's flanked by an Old Testament prophet on one side and the evangelist on the other. So with morality, she actually has her eyes closed, or she has no eyes in this statue. What's that mean? It means that we're going to focus on morality again. We need to start with our own hearts. We need to look within in order to fix what's wrong with ourselves within, rather than just be focused so much on the outward stuff. Law. We have laws, we still have stuff that we have to follow. It's that simple. We all want to be above the law. We all think that we can change the law. There's rules of law for a reason. The Bible has laws in them. We need to follow the law of the Bible, not the law of Travis, not the law of Paul. There's laws of the Bible that we need to follow. Why, again, is this world going to crap? Because we've drifted so far from what the Bible says. It gives us this great blueprint of what we can do to be successful. Heck, it's even got plenty of examples of people screwing up, But the rule of law is in there, and we need to look at it and follow it. The other is education. And this is actually a picture of a female, again, and it really represents, in this case, that what we talked about earlier, is that we're responsible for making sure that our children get the education that they need. You send them into public school, they're going to learn certain things, sure. But the education about how to live correctly, how to live pure, what's right and wrong, that's on us. And that's, again, why we gather together, so we can learn and get kind of reinvigorated with, there might be something that I might not exceed in, or to be successful in, but something that you guys can help with, or something that you can pull someone aside and be like, hey, work on this, or, something to that extent. But the bottom line is that if you look at the statue, and I encourage you to just read about it online, because it's really phenomenal. For the education of your child, if we're going to allow for video games to educate our children, or YouTube to educate our children, and we're not going to take the time to sit down with them and say, this is what's going on, or this is wrong because of this, you can't expect them to grow up to be this great person if you're not willing to be that first example for them. And then the last is liberty. It's accompanied by peace on one side and overthrow of tyranny on the opposite. Because we're kind of like right in the middle. When you have freedom, there's going to be peace, and then there's always going to be this time, that it's right in the middle. Liberty is here, but the reality is that if we don't live within our freedom, you're going to lose the peace, and then we're going to go into this crazy world. And so don't take our freedom for granted at the same time, but just know that we got to right the ship. And really the only way that we're going to get back to that again is if we go back to our heart. We need to change our heart, and we need to be the example. We need to be the change that we want other people to see. I think that's what it boils down to more than anything. So we need to look at our own soul. Are we living like Peter said? Are we going out? Are we speaking well? Are we living well? Are we doing things for others so that people can't say anything? Or are we just getting so caught up in the crap, getting conformed to all the junk that's going on? And then we're really, at this point, a part of the problem, not a part of the solution. So that's really my part, what I think we can do to change everything. I want to just see your guys' take on what you think is going on in this world and what you think we can do.